as I expected, but Nick Farrell, welcome to Magic Without Fears, a Hermetic podcast. Good to have you here.
Thanks.
Yeah, sorry for the intro, just sort of cut off there before the end, but that's okay. Hopefully the delay issues with the camera will work themselves out. Yeah, it's an interesting delay going on, but hopefully that's not too bad. If it is, we can always jump off stream and try something else. But yeah, so let us know, people in the chat. Some weird technical glitches today with my setup. First time I've reset it up since the conference, so maybe I've just got something a bad cable plugged into the wrong place. But hopefully it's not too bad, and hopefully my delay works itself out. Let me reduce my.
Maybe you brought back an Enochian spirit.
Yeah, that could be. Okay, no, can't see. I'm only at 720 resolution, so it should be fine. Yeah. Hey, Steve Mitchell in the chat. Glad you're catching this live, brother. Yeah, so hopefully it's not too bad, or hopefully the recording works itself out. If it is really problematic, people, please let us know if my stream is if it's just too clunky. Hopefully it's okay. So hopefully we can get through a nice chat. These things used to just be all audio. Okay, sounds good. Thank you for letting me know that. Sounds good on your end. Might just be a delay here in the studio. I'm not sure why, but anyway, let's just not worry about that and let's have fun because we have Nick Farrell here today. Nick, it is beyond a pleasure, and I'm so excited to talk to you because I really your books really kept me company during our interminable lockdown here in Canada, and Beyond the Sun, Mather's Last Secret, King Over the Water. That's a controversial book. I'm not entirely sure why. I have some idea, but that's a controversial book, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I loved it. I had a great time reading that one. I'm going to read that and Beyond the Sun many more times in my life. And when debating your approach to some of these historical characters like McGregor Mathers with people, I've always said, like, well, no one else is really writing about these guys very much, these folk, right? There's not many people trying to tackle the lives and work of the Golden Dawn founders, and so I sort of really appreciate anyone who does, and I especially like that you have strong opinions on these people.
Well, it's not so much strong opinions. The fact is that these people were human, and one of the problems within the Golden Dawn or any other occult group, I mean, you see this a lot in BOTA, you see it with Crowley, you see it with all of them, is that they want their teachers to be gods, and they're not. They're really funny failures of humans often. And if you say that out loud, people will look at you and say, oh, no, that's heresy. Well, it's not heresy, it's true. And I mean, Mathers is potentially one of the funniest people, very clever, but very, very funny. And you can't ignore that. It's one of his features. He wouldn't see it, which is why he's funny. And a lot of these people, I think, if you look at the stories that you create, when I was looking at history, for example, in Mather's Last Secret or King Over the Water, it was about how these people were human, and they weren't these fantastic demigods. And as you look at the stories that they come out, I mean, they've all got flaws in them. And that makes them interesting to me, because if you're a magician, you're supposed to have flaws. You're not supposed to be perfect. And anyone who tries to make people perfect is going against humanity. And that's what I wanted to get back into the Golden Dawn histories, was these are humans.
That makes me think, of course, how can I not think of what Christine Zaleski, who I recently had the pleasure of talking to, was saying about her upcoming biography on Jack Taylor, right? She wants to honor him, but honor him by showing the human side, right? The Deus et homo, as we might say.
Well, Taylor's a case in point. He, to some people, was brilliantly ingenious and all these other things. To other people in Hawke's Bay, he wasn't. And I mean, if you talk to, I mean, he fell out with more people within the old Farrell than most people would think. But a brilliant man. I mean, I've seen his stuff, and he was generating really interesting stuff from the Golden Dawn and Farrell at the time. And again, that gets missed if you factionalize it into good, good Golden Dawn, bad Golden Dawn person. Just accept them as Golden Dawn people, and you're probably all right. There are those also who depend on overemphasized personas. Crowley was one of them, but there are some others in the modern Golden Dawn who overemphasize their persona to make them seem more important or more knowledgeable than they are. And I think some of the really good modern Golden Dawn people are those you don't ever hear about, or are deliberately keeping a low profile, whereas those who make the biggest noise usually know nothing. And those who claim lineage publicly usually haven't got it.
Yeah. You know, it reminds me actually of when I first started doing this podcast during lockdown, because what else could we do? And people were asking me, because I was podcasting every day, people were asking me, like, how much magic are you practicing these days? And I said to them, without skipping a beat, I was like, the more someone's talking online or doing stuff out there in the world that you can see, probably the less magic they're doing. So not, you know, I said, if you ever see me not podcasting every day, chances are I'm busy doing some magic. But if I'm podcasting every day, you can bet I'm not doing as much magic as if I wasn't. You know, like there is a cost to being public. There's a cost to teaching, to sharing things online, to putting out books for people to gawk at or learn from as they will. And yeah, a lot of the best magicians, of course, and most serious practitioners are going to be people we've never heard of. I mean, how many people have we seen go through temples and orders we've been a part of over the years that were great people, great magicians, and you'll never hear of them, because why would you? They've never been online. They've never said who they were. They're just living their lives. And that's the interesting about the Golden Dawn tradition to me, is that it is meant for ordinary people living ordinary lives. I think a lot of the times people get the sense that it was for London aristocrats, whereas it was probably more accurately for bohemians, perhaps, but even more accurately. Yeah, and you know what, I know some people have said that, and I'm like, okay, I can sort of see that, but it's not entirely true, because like Westcott wasn't a bohemian, was he? Like most of these older guys who started were bohemians.
He was liberal, but he was on the liberal end of the on the conservative spectrum in London. But I mean, Mina Mathers, for example, people say that she was bohemian type, and she was absolutely neo-Nazi, uptight. It's impossible to avoid her. I mean, Dion Fortune was understating the problems with that woman, and yet she is touted as this great bohemian hippie type. But I mean, how many bohemian hippie types do you know that are terrified of sex?
Exactly. I didn't believe that for the longest time, but I do believe it now. I do.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was clear as letters saying it. Whereas Florence Farr, she was bohemian and was brilliant, and I think she's one of the understated people of the Golden Dawn. And I mean, she ran it for a long time, and people forget that.
Yeah, understated as you can be when you run the show.
Yeah, well, I mean, she ran the show, but the Golden Dawn at that time was very low key. I mean, it had very few members. When you look at in New Zealand, Farrell, you can see that it was Mr. Falcon in charge of things, but his wife ran it for years after he died. And most of what I consider Farrell's approach to things comes from Mrs. Falcon rather than him.
Yeah, Yeah, that makes sense, because she was more in charge of shaping how in the form and way in the way in which it passed on and continued after him, right? Also,
Yeah.
she was no slouch. Her writings are quite remarkable. Her insights and some of her work that I've seen in manuscript form is remarkable. Not much of it's been published. We could actually probably stand to have a bit more on her written, in case you are interested in living forever and never stopping what you're doing. That would be great.
I did. I
Because we're
did.
losing people capable of talking about these people, or we're losing people capable of writing about these people,
Well, this is one of the
unfortunately.
sad things. Is when I met the Farrell people, I was a kid and didn't know didn't know anything. And so I was quite in awe of these people, but at the same time, I didn't really know what sort of questions to ask them. Now, I think I can think of a million questions to ask them. I know that they probably wouldn't answer half of them, because that's another thing that people forget about. It, Ra and the Golden Dawn would be the same. It was a secret organization. They didn't talk about these things. And one of the things I think is funny is about modern Golden Dawners, particularly Americans, waving certificates or saying, I've got lineage from this, I've got lineage from this. And, you know, to Ra, the old people at Ra would be amused by this at best, because you just didn't say any of the things positive, any things about the groups you're in. You didn't talk about them. You didn't talk about the teaching. You didn't talk about it to anyone. So when I was talking to these people, and I had associations with them through another group, it was like getting blood out of a stone. And that's fair enough, because it's a secret organization. But I mean, you see these people almost bragging about it on YouTube now, and you think, that's gone. That whole secrecy thing you can't do anymore, which is a pity, really, because it stops people behaving like twats, which they do. You see this a lot in Wicca, where people say, I'm a 14th generation Gardnerian witch. What value does that have? Your high priestesses back can date their lineage to Gerald Gardner. So what? Does it mean you're meaningful? Does it mean your spiritual path is correct or any better than anyone else? I mean, some TikTok witches behave better than some Gardnerians I've seen. And the same thing that applies to the Golden Dawn people as well. And as I've got older, and I'm getting to be 60, these sorts of things, because when I started, there was this level of enthusiasm which you had to have to carry you through it all, because these people were distant, the experiences were weird, and that was very difficult to get people to explain what was happening to you. And now that's all gone. That sort of ever of mystery attached to it is gone, and people often blame leaders and things like that, and it isn't. It's just because the attention span of modern people is very, very short, and if you don't give people something interesting or exciting, they'll move on to the next shiny object, and that's not what it was like in the early Golden Dawn. It certainly wasn't like in Fourier. And it shouldn't really be like that in established orders. And then you've got other established orders which are almost rotting from the inside, because they're trying to hang on to a past that they never had. And they're not tackling some of the leaders' personal problems, which they're passing on to their students. So you get groups where you have misogynistic leaders treating women extremely badly, and they're almost allowed to continue, and they bring the whole order thing into disrepute. But anyway, I'm off on rant topic now. So
it's all right. I as someone who grew up in the world of Robert Zink, right? I spent my teen years in that order, though you didn't really meet him till years later. But just I firsthand got to witness how toxic culture can be passed down, because of course I know I've seen the splinter orders that fragmented from that group, and I've been able to observe over the decades now. It's a crazy thing to be able to say, which sort of bad habits got passed down and continued and which ones didn't. You can sort of almost see it in you'll like this point. You can almost see it by those who re-envisioned and rewrote the grade material for their new group versus those who didn't. Right. And it's like those who didn't tended to pass down a lot of other bad habits from that percolated in that earlier group, whereas the ones that have tackled the base understanding they have of things and re-envisioned it for the people there, I think they've become a bit healthier and with less problems. And again, this isn't to say that all groups are just plagued by problems. Most groups,
no, but I mean,
in my experience,
one of the problems with groups is that their initiations can be a sexually transmitted disease, and that it's passed from the leader to the student. So if the leader hasn't dealt with some of their problems as part of their early audio work, and what you find is some groups are actually founded by people who say, I'm going to start at 5, 6, so I can initiate everybody. Then their problems are passed down to the others. I mean, I'll give an example which is almost defamatory, but Israel Regardie, he initiated Pat Beeman. Now, she was his student, but she was also his patient, and she was an alcoholic. And you get a lot of, within that lineage of Regardie to Pat Beeman, of people sleeping with students and going on and on and on, and it carries on. And I think it's what Josephine McCarthy calls parasites, where a parasite is passed from one person to another. So what you have to be careful with is, when you're joining groups, is that you know where these people have been, and look for warning signs that they're not going to be particularly good. A lot of people think, I'm going to join a group. I'm going to join a group, and it's quite exciting, but it really isn't. And you have to be very, very careful at that point. But anyway, this is, again, I'm off topic again, which is something I do. And you've gone quiet.
Sorry. Did you say that you're 59?
Yeah, until next week.
Oh, well, happy early birthday. And I gotta tell you, it's sometimes hard. I know my beard throws people off with my age sometimes. It's sometimes hard to tell a gentleman's age when they have a lovely graying beard like us, right?
Yeah.
I'm very pleased to hear that you're 59. Yeah, I don't know you, of course, personally. So there was part of me that was afraid that you might be quite a bit older, and I just really need you around as long as possible. I hope you know that.
I'm going to be around for a while yet.
Good, because like
I started this when I was 17, so it's and I mean, it's been most of the goals that I've had, other than journalism ones, which is another big part of what I did in my life. I started both at 17, and so all the decisions I've made, I mean, I went to England because I wanted to find more occult teaching, and ironically enough, if I could have stayed in New Zealand a bit longer, but because at that stage I was hooked into the Farrell crowd in Hawke's Bay, but I was all excited about what I was going to do in England, and I did meet some interesting people there and learnt an awful lot before, and that was before I got into the Golden Dawn. So, the Golden Dawn was a way, once I joined the HOGD, I was able to look at the Golden Dawn stuff that I'd picked up and approach it from what I knew from Farrell people. And so when I set up MOA, I realized how flexible, for example, the Golden Dawn really is. And you could have a traditional Golden Dawn group that was doing something slightly different, which got out of the egregore of the original Golden Dawn, but was still interesting and different. And that's where I could add things like paganism, god forms, pagan god forms, and things like that. And I think that's one of the things that people tend to always, including Mathers, tend to Masonicize the Golden Dawn rather than magicize it. And that's been one of my big things, is I always wanted to make sure that the magical side of the Golden Dawn, particularly in the Outer Order, was emphasized. And I think I did that within my own group, and I was happy with that. I'm not sure. I have seen some HOGD groups that would honestly scared the pants off of me, and they were really good. I've seen some that are complete rubbish.
Yeah, I think I'm not the only one who appreciates you emphasizing the magical side of the system and of temples. I certainly push back on a temple understanding. I try to promote a temple understanding of the system rather than a lodge understanding, which seems to be something that a lot of people do try and sort of encourage, is to look at it as another lodge, like an OTO lodge or a Masonic lodge. And my experience of the Golden Dawn is that these things are radically different. I mean, I was 14, 15 when I went through an Amorc initiation at the temple here in Vancouver before it was shut down. I lived in an OTO oasis when I was 10 years old, and then taught in one in Belfast when I was 29 years old. So I have some experience with that. And then I did the first degree of Freemasonry when I was 24, before I had to move to Europe. And none of those experiences were even remotely similar to what I experienced in the Golden Dawn initiations and ceremonies. The whole approach and setup is different. I mean, in lodges we wear shoes. We wear shoes. In Golden Dawn, you don't walk into the temple, let alone an initiation, with shoes on, right?
Not street shoes, no.
Yeah, they did in the original order.
No, you wore slippers. Red
slippers.
They
wore slippers. Yeah, red slippers, right?
In Farrell, the women wore red stockings as well, and it was one of the funny things that, because everybody in Havelock North knew there was this weird temple on the hill, and you could tell when they were going to have a meeting, because all these women with red stockings would start walking up the hill, and it was pretty obvious.
That must have been so scary for some people. like you'd think you're maybe in a cult town.
Oh yeah, but they were. And the other thing was that the Tony Fuller told me this story, that the local operators, because it was all on party lines, so all your calls had to be done through an operator. So when people were ringing members of the temple, and the operators were saying, no, they won't be there tonight, so they must have known who the members were.
To be a fly on the wall of those operators during their coffee breaks, like the things they must have. Oh my gosh! Talk about a vow of secrecy being thwarted at a technological level. Wow. Damn.
Anyway.
Yeah. Back to your point about when it comes, before I don't want to lose this thread. You talked about lineage. Now, we all know in the Golden Dawn tradition what we mean when we say lineage, but it's not what most people think we mean. So what's your understanding of the way lineage works versus, well, is it more about lineage, or is it about being linked to the tradition? And what does that mean?
I have a weird view on this, and I've been told this by even traditional people that I have a weird idea on this. But there is a ritual in Farrell called the link, and it's given out at the 7/4. It was done often at the same time. Tony Fuller says it was sometimes given to 5/6s, but it was a specific ritual. And what this ritual did was it was supposed to link you to the Golden Dawn tradition. And so if you hadn't had that ritual given to you by someone who was qualified to do it, you didn't have lineage. You couldn't initiate to 5/6, 5/6 and certain 5/6 and beyond. Now, the important difference here is the ritual itself is very, very simple. Pat Zaletsky even published it. But if you were to try and do it without having that connection, it wouldn't work. So what it does is it ties you into a link in a chain that goes all the way back. It actually says all the way back to Christian Rosenkrantz, but it goes back further than that. And I think to be plugged in like that is lineage. Now, getting that is really hard. In fact, it's nearly impossible, because there are very few people who are qualified to do that ritual. And so you can publish the ritual and no one can do it. So this people will say, well, that's just Farrell. But I think there's there must have been some equivalence within AO. Otherwise, the whole cipher manuscripts nonsense and all that sort of stuff wouldn't have happened. They're all looking for the same link back to the original source, whatever that is. And I think it is possible for people to find that themselves, but I think if anybody said they had got it, I would say they hadn't. Again, because of Fight Club. The Fight Club motto is, you don't talk about Fight Club if you're in Fight Club. And the same things, you don't talk about lineage. If you have got Golden Dawn lineage, you don't talk about having Golden Dawn lineage. It's the same thing. Anybody who says they've got it instantaneously disqualifies themselves from having it. And it's acknowledged amongst the people who do have it. They'll look at someone and say, yeah, you've got it, I recognize that, but we're not going to talk about it either. So again, there are some things that people say, well, there must be paperwork. There isn't. I mean, I challenge anybody to find any paperwork saying anybody had lineage from any order. You've got a certificate to form a temple, but anyone can make those. In fact, anyone did make those, but it doesn't necessarily mean you've got that spiritual right to form a group and connect to it. And that has to be done purely on your own efforts, or through meeting someone who does have the right to do it. And that, good luck finding that. I had somebody try to join one group, a Moa group, and they said, I have Farrell lineage. I said, well, no. That was strike one. Strike two was, I want to join your group, but you have to make me a 7/4. About that point, it became abusive. But there's a lot of people who think, just all I have to do is say it, and it's true, and it's not, certainly not like that.
Yeah, it's what interests me is the fact that, or the idea that lineage or link in the GD, that the continuation of the GD tradition is more about something spiritual and ephemeral rather than a document or this person taught me. Right. That's one of that's the fundamental thing that I really want to highlight for people, that I appreciate about the tradition, is that it is based on a spiritual connection rather than on someone signing over. Like, here in town, one of my friends is the charter holder for the SRIA in Canada, right? I asked him what that, how significant that was for him and what it meant to him, and he was like, "Oh, nothing." He's very older guy, Mason, and he's just like, "Yeah, whatever." Those guys who are doing it, they're a bit crazy. They're all like conservative Anglicans now and stuff. I don't want to say too much, but it wasn't this holy and sacred thing that he held in his hands. It was like, yeah, technically
This
I'm
is a
the
piece of
guy,
paper.
whatever,
I
right?
mean,
And I
the
was like,
golden
well, yeah.
the Golden Dawn wars were basically fought over pieces of paper, and that was where a lot of people don't understand was, or legal rights over things. I mean, how can you settle who's got a link to the Golden Dawn in a court? I mean, a judge can really decide who's got a right to link to the Golden Dawn. And yeah, sure, technically they do, practically they don't, and that was where it all ends. And I think there is an idea that there is a magical piece of paper or magical lineage or something like that, and when people bring them out, they're usually forged or bogus. I mean, the Golden Dawn did it itself. I mean, it's not that's when we're talking about
That's
parasitic
what the ciphers are.
infections, the whole things are the ciphers were possibly were like that, forged connection to a European order. Um, Although still, jury's still out on that, and I think it probably will be long after I'm dead,
Oh,
because
well,
I went through that a few times when I was looking over in King Over the Water, and I'm not quite sure. The fact is, the ciphers, for example, don't seem to be important or don't seem to be referred to until Mathers is thrown out. And then suddenly everybody
yeah.
wants to see them, and suddenly they appear. And that, I mean, the journalist in me says somebody's covering up something.
Well, I think that Tony's new articles, Dr. Fuller's new articles in the Light Extended, uh, are clarifying. I want to say revolutionary, but let's be academic and say clarifying. That's almost even a harder punch than revolutionary. It's like it looks really convincingly like Mathers made the system, and then Westcott created the ciphers from Mathers' system as a way to insert himself into it, and that's shocking. But it all of a sudden clears up all kinds of issues and confusions. Dr.
Well, one thing
Burns
it
wrote a
doesn't,
couple great posts and analyses on it. She and I talked about it in person when she was here because she really did read it with a careful eye, as did I. I had a couple days in the hospital and I just went deep into, nothing else to do. The orderlies found it very interesting as well.
when I
Hearing
looked at,
about this.
I mean, there's that, but I think the biggest problem with them is the 6.5 and 7.4. There are huge holes within the Golden Dawn system, and one of them is the 5.6 doesn't look like any of the other rituals. Even the portal, it doesn't look like. The structures are different. There's no paths. There should be paths going into it. Some of the paths are blocked at portal and are never opened in the entire career of the student, which is a terrible thing. I mean, that is bad ritual writing. And then you've got the 6.5, which although I understand the 6.5 and 7.4 of Farrell, I think they went far too off the Golden Dawn track with those rituals. I think they tried to include the 5.6 and add in stuff to it. It doesn't quite work. It gets too busy and too cluttered. And one of the things I like about the Golden Dawn when it's done properly is it's very direct, very good to the subconscious, and it's very simple to build a ritual structure out of. So I at least have rewritten the 6.5 and 7.4. I know some other people have as well. Other groups have as well, for the same reasons. It fills this hole that is lacking within the original system. And I mean, the Mathers original 6.5 was awful. I mean, I pulled it to bits and I couldn't see anything of merit in it at all. It looked like it had literally been designed if you had a rich person who was prepared to write you a big check to do this ritual. It had no value, you know, as far as I could see at all. But yeah, I think they should.
Especially in contrast to the Farrell version.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah, which is
that's
I think the Farrell version is really beautiful, and in fact, I always have my my moonstone here right next to me, and do a lot of I practice those exercises. Some of them are one of them is basically straight out of Steiner, and something I was taught as a kid to do in Waldorf school. Some of the other ones are really interesting, and one of them is actually very difficult. I find them. I'm really thrilled that you published them in your book so that we could enjoy them. So thank you again for that. Yeah, I think the Farrell rituals, well, all the Stella Matutina rituals, people are always surprised to see that in some ways they seem better than the
well, they
earlier
are better.
rituals. And
The,
yeah,
the,
right.
the
They've been
thing is, the
improved.
ones that Regardie published were wrong. I mean, and people have always assumed that the Regardie versions were the perfect Stella Matutina rituals, and they weren't. I mean, Farrell was Stella Matutina. Its rituals were, in essence, Golden Dawn ones, identical, with Golden Dawn crossed out and Farrell written into them. And so I think that, I mean, the portal was changed, but the original, the ones that Regardie published were cut down versions, and that's due to a slight conspiracy between him and the printer of the time, the publisher of the time, who managed to get their paws on cut down versions of those rituals. So if you look at them, you can see how much they were shortened. And there are lots of people who swear by, you know, the Black Book and or the Blue Book or all these other things, but they were cut down versions. And so to go back to the original Stella Matutina ones, you've got to go back to Pat Zaletsky, Lord Manticore, which is what I published the full Farrell rituals, and in his book Rituals and Commentaries, and that's available now. But I bet you a lot of people aren't using them.
It's the #1 book I tell people to get is the 3rd edition of GD Rituals and Commentary. I have the 1st edition, which is missing lots of pages and has 100 pages in reverse order. Go figure. So it's an early 1st edition. You know exactly the details around. Yeah, so it's weird. I don't know how I got it. Well, I do, but it's like leather bound in blue leather. Someone might have cobbled it together from a typewritten, from a printed out. I don't know. It's weird. I have the 2nd edition, which Martin put out, and then your 3rd edition, which has a very beautiful font and is the standard edition that hopefully people will start to use. Is that 3rd edition? Yeah, someone here in the chat is also saying that they love it. Steve Mitchell is a Golden Dawn guy who was here at Enokia Con, and he loves it. He's read it 4 times. 4 times. Okay. Yeah, it's every time I tell someone or people to read that, especially students, they usually put it off. But when then I get an urgent message saying, "Oh my God, I finally looked at this book, which you've been telling me to look at, and holy cow!" Like,
yeah,
mind blowing.
Pat did a really good job on getting people to see those rituals in a completely different way. And I mean, there are some things I don't agree with, and but you see them when you are doing the rituals themselves. And Pat's seen them, I've seen them, and you really need to get into those. And one of the things he does is he emphasizes the God forms and the energy flows in the ritual, which most people, if you're particularly approaching it in the Masonic way, will run a mile before. Yeah. I mean, you have people visualizing God forms, or you have them visualizing a color ray, or you're supposed to be visualizing a chasm opening up in the floor, or the candidate dying. I mean, this is really quite important stuff, but it's been chopped out by the modern people, and as a result, these initiations lose a lot of their grunt. So people will comment that they always feel stronger in the oath, which is fine. They feel stronger when they're between the pillars or between the wands. Again, these are obvious things, but there are other ones that, for example, I can remember when I got hit by the Carrick staff, I felt like shit warmed up. It was noticeably, I felt like I was going to pass out. And that is what you're supposed to be feeling. You're supposed to feel at that point, as you enter the temple, you have to die. And if you don't, then none of what happens later is important. And that was something that Pat got me onto quite early on. And I suddenly said, oh, yeah, I understand. Anyway, the other thing that,
the point. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to jump to another subject.
I just want to say for people, the thing that I love that has been sort of clarified throughout talking about is I love that you emphasize and seem to acknowledge that the Golden Dawn tradition is, at the end of the day, more about, here's how I would put it. I hope the siren's not too loud. We both live in busy cities, don't we? The system is more about the spirit of the law rather than the letter of the law, right? Less about the documents that you have, and perhaps more about your ability to work with God forms on the throne of the Hierophant when you're doing a ceremony in your temple. Like, what matters more, the fact that you have all the documents, or the fact that you are really good at doing that job, that role?
Yeah, it's not, it's even down to how you do the magic itself. I mean, the Golden Dawn gives you all the material to work with. Your teachers within an order will show you how to use it if you ask them. And then you build that system yourself. It's the start of your magical career. It's not the end. You go from the Golden Dawn to what you want, where you want to go yourself. It doesn't stop with you just doing the Golden Dawn, people. And so when you find people telling you, I've got a photocopy by Beeridge which says you have to stand on one foot while you are chanting this name, and you have never heard that before, but I'm sure the photocopy is right. Beeridge was a bit nuts. So you can say, well, what's that got to do with anything? How is that important? But the photocopy. No, not the photocopy. It's what you do, how you live it. And one of the problems is I'm interested to see, the original Golden Dawn papers. I find them interesting to read and everything else. But if they don't fit in, if I read a paper that doesn't fit into what I've done, or I can't find a use for it, I won't use it. And I have tried most of my magical life to understand the stooping dragon formula, and to be honest, I don't care. It doesn't make any sense to me. I can't work it into my magic. People say, oh, it's incredibly useful. Yeah, but I haven't seen it used much. So I don't. It doesn't. I will. But geomancy, now, this is funny. You say people will say, stooping dragon formula is vital to the Golden Dawn tradition. And you just mention the word geomancy, and they'll suddenly shut up, because nobody wants to touch geomancy. Because geomancy,
it wasn't my favorite thing.
No, exactly, because nobody really knows how to approach it. And this is one of the things why I got really into it over the last couple of years. And that's because between Catton, who I published first, and it's conveniently now backwards.
It looks good.
There's he was the medieval guy who codified geomancy as we know it. And so I started with him, and suddenly something weird happened. So things went in my brain, and suddenly I realized, hang on, why are all these people in the Middle Ages, up to and including Mathers and the Golden Dawn, all going on about geomancy? What is it that's so important about it? And because if it's just divination and it's not doesn't seem, I mean, Catalan's approach to divination is completely different from Regarde's, but closer to Mathis's. If you look at it, there is something that's much, much deeper, much more spiritual, much more magical going on there. And Farrell in the 7-4 ritual has the candidate given 16 nails. And they use it to, there's a cross that they're standing on. And they use these 16 nails to build a cube for the candidate to stand on. So Geomancy, 16 figures, represents those nails. So they're the nails that turn the cross into the cube. And so when you're looking at all these figures, there is something very, very deep going on there that nobody seems to have scratched the surface of. And the only reason they haven't really scratched the surface of is because astrology was rescued by Alan Leo in the 1800s. But geomancy, which was infinitely as respectable in the Middle Ages, wasn't. So what we have is a tradition that nearly died out, but its magical importance comes from this guy. Again, who's
all right. Here we are.
And this is
the new book.
This is a new book. And
that is a tome.
Oh God.
Theomagica.
Yeah, Theomagica.
What did you do?
Oh, I don't know.
What are you doing to yourself?
What it all started because Pat Zaletsky asked me when I was in England, living in England. He had been told by someone in Farrell that Theomagica was really important. And it wasn't just about geomancy, it was really important. And Pat thought it was to do with the magical images, because he thought, we know that Mathis read this book. We know that Waite read this book. And it was a huge influence on them both, and probably Westcott too. When I got it into the British Library, you have a limited amount of time you can have with it, because there are only 2 copies I know of in existence. One was in the British Library, one is in Yale. The one in Yale is the person who owned it had to write half of the preface in handwriting. It was very cryptic, but you can get it in PDF, but it's unreadable. So what I did was I went through it slowly, page by page, sentence by sentence, and re-edited it into modern English. And as I did, the story became obvious. But when I did Pat, magical images were what were found in the Golden Dawn. The geomancy in it was more or less what's in the Golden Dawn, but that's because Hayden copied that from Catan. So it was very similar. But one thing that was really interesting in this book, which I didn't realize, in fact, I was going through the preface, and it was a long thing about Isis, the legend of Isis and Osiris and everything else. But what Hayden had done is he changed all the names. And initially it didn't make any sense at all, until one of the names I realized was the intelligence of Mercury. So what he had done is he had taken the Egyptian gods and transposed them with the names of the intelligences and spirits, thus making the whole legend into an interaction between these different spirits. So the god forms became planetary spirits. And what makes this doubly interesting is this is how the Golden Dawn works. The planets, the gods are also planets. They're planetary spirits. And you can see how Mathis would be reading that preface thinking, I can use this. And that's probably what Hayden had in mind. It's cryptic. He doesn't ever explain it, but it makes much, much more sense when you think about it. How can I use this? Because the preface takes up a big chunk of the book. Well, more than you think. It's quite a big lump. So why would somebody go to that extent if they didn't have something to say over it? Another thing that's odd, which I think is really funny, in the middle of it, for no apparent reason, Hayden slapped a chapter, well, several chapters, called the Advice for Kings. And in it, he gives advice to the king, how to avoid, how to be a good king. And you think, what the hell has this got to do in a occulty book? And you could think, well, it might be that he was just trying to suck up to the king, which he certainly was trying to do. But it's also possible, if you read what a king is to Hayden and a Neoplatonic person, a king was in the chain between heaven and earth. An initiate is in the chain between heaven and earth. So while he seems to be giving advice to the king, which he could be, he's actually giving advice to what it's like to be an initiate and what you're supposed to avoid. So, for example, where he's saying, don't listen to praise, don't listen to flatterers, which is a good advice for a king, but it's a really good advice for an initiate. If you are a big poobah of some order, if you're an occult leader, you don't want to listen to these sorts of people. And what I think he's doing is he's making initiates into kings, and which is an interesting idea. Bad for ego, but an interesting idea to give advice to, rather than giving it to King Charles II, who had at that point turned Buckingham Palace into a brothel and probably wasn't interested in any advice at all.
Dear Lord, is that true?
Oh, yeah. King Charles II was famous. His last words were not any sort of great waiting for God thing. His last words were literally to make sure that his mistress didn't die penniless. He made one of his courtiers promise to make sure she doesn't starve. That was his last mistress. So yeah, not really worthwhile giving much advice.
Well, at least he really loved his ladies, I suppose.
Yeah.
It would have been. It could be worse if I guess he could have died and forgetting not with none of their names on his lips.
Yeah,
but yeah, I don't know.
He remembered the last one. I think it's. But this other thing here is he's got this magic system in here, and whereas Catton didn't have a magic system, and this is why I think geomancy is important. I think it's the earth expression of spiritual powers. So, okay, yes, you can use it for divination and oracles. But if you look also, the dots are used to create magical shapes. And so I did a bit of an experiment with this. If you know that each geomantic figure, because you were in the Golden Dawn, each geomantic figure has 4 lines, fire for each of the elements, so fire, water, air, and earth. Now, the top one, if it's 1 dot, it's active. If it's 2 dots, it's passive. Okay, so very similar to the I Ching. Now, if you put this on a temple floor and open the quarters according to what's active, passive, etc., you can actually create a geomantic figure on the floor. And so, say for example, you were doing a solar ritual, you could open the quarters so that you are putting Fortuna Major on the floor, and it would increase the power of your ritual, and it would earth it. So these are things which you can actually integrate to make it much, much more practical and useful. But Hayden, bless him, tried to get every coffin spit he could about geomancy, as well as magic itself. And so you have, those are all symbols, neatly backward, of all the geomantic figures you can use. He had a complete range of spirits. The GD had 7, he has 14. So you have all these spirits and intelligences and all this all neatly arranged into a magic system which you can build. And Hayden was an interesting person. I mean, Waite didn't like him much, but Waite had to admit that he knew what he was talking about. And I think Hayden was one of those magicians who loves theatre, loves the drama of it all, and liked being front of house. So he's a bit like Crowley. Whereas, you know, he tends to be frowned upon by those who like all the photocopies, like all the academic approach to magic. He was very much a, you know, I'm going to try this stuff out sort of thing. And he wrote lots of books. I mean, there's that one is his most famous and useful. He did another one, which after I did Theomagica, I didn't have the will to do it. But there's another one I could do, one of his earlier ones, which is also very useful. He was England's last Rosicrucian, before last notable Rosicrucian. Before later on it came back, but Rosicrucian movement rose up. It finally got to Britain later than anyone else. It influenced people like Flood and him. He read everything Flood had. He liberally stole from Flood as well. But Flood wrote in Latin, whereas he wrote in English. So his stuff is infinitely more accessible. And now, having gone through and edited it, it's even more accessible, because if you've ever read 17th century English, it's hard going. In fact, somebody said to me on one of the Facebook groups, they said, "Oh, you can get that on PDF." And I said, "Well, good luck reading it." I mean, it would honestly take you a day to get through a page, and there are 990 pages of it. So yeah, it's all there and readable.
Yeah. I used to have a job reading from 17th and 18th century manuscripts in the Belfast Public Archives for a postdoc who was blind. So I had to be his eyes. And wow, like, thank God I had a little bit of training in doing that, because yeah, it's not easy. And also the thing I realized is how much marginalia there is that is just not captured in PDFs today, right? Like when I looked at the Splendor Solis manuscript, all this writing around the sides, none of it's there in any of the facsimiles or recreations, unless they're the ones specifically done to capture that writing. So there's all this German writing around the sides, and I was just day in, day out trying to transcribe as much of these German notes around the edges of the Splendor Solis. So a lot of stuff doesn't get captured when you do PDFs or photographs, and just is hard to read, period. So John Hayden, when was he born? What was his life period? Because I think a lot of people
he was a teenager during the English Civil War. A young boy in the English Civil War, because he claimed he led a cavalry charge at the Battle of Edgehill, which is incredibly unlikely. But he was a royalist, and he survived through Cromwell's rule, the Protectorate. So he was lucky to survive. He said Cromwell had threatened to kill him. He was thrown in jail, but I'm not sure. because it's one of those things where Hayden tends to say stuff and it may not have been true, but he certainly was in prison with some very notable royalists, one of whom was a guy called Villiers, and who was a real rake and was saved when Charles II came back during the restoration of the monarchy, but fell from grace, came back again, and fell from grace. So Hayden had a lot of really good protectors. But what's interesting about Hayden is we don't know when he died, and we don't know how he died. He just disappears, which is quite good for a Rosicrucian. But he just, there's no final book, no final essay. Nobody even talked about him after a certain period, and it's not clear why. And
yeah, yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, I don't think I'd only heard his name in passing until recently. Your book came out, and of course, I think you're going to cause an uptick in interest in this fellow and his time period. It's interesting that you say he's sort of the last Rosicrucian of that early initial spring of English Rosicrucianism. I mean, it was sort of preserved in Masonry in England, I suppose. I assume, right? Because
well, no, he fell out with the Masons.
But
he
didn't.
He was. I mean, what's his name?
I just mean Rosicrucianism. Rosicrucianism was wrapped into Masonry degrees, so there's an element of it that stayed there. But you're saying the Rosicrucianism of Hayden and of those folks in the 17th century, faded out after him.
Well, people stopped writing and pretending to try and contact the Rosicrucians after him. Basically, English society moved from mystical to more. Well, you talk about Hooke, you talk about Newton, all these sorts of people are around that period. And so suddenly you're getting this rationality of the Enlightenment, and there's no real room for Rosicrucians in that. Elias Ashmole hated him. So did William Lilly. Hayden was originally friends with William Lilly, and then they fell out. And there are all sorts of snarks about William Lilly in this book, calling him an ill-educated tailor and all sorts of things like that, which is fighting talk to a British person in London. And
I bet.
So I think he really was. He did have followers. He was noticed. He wasn't sort of like, a man standing on the street shouting. He was followed, and he was respected. Certainly not by the scientific class, which was forming then, but by, usually royalist people. I don't think he had, he makes references to people, and some of them whom he can't have met, but others, he did divinations for example. There's lots of examples of divinations. What I find interesting about his divinations is some of them are wrong, and I'm not sure why I had to fix them, but I'm not sure if it's his fault or the printer, because it was an age where English printing was really backward, and they often flipped things. And you see this in the Enochian, in True and Faithful Relation, where they flip the famous gold talisman of the 4 castles.
Did they?
Yeah, it's flipped in True and Faithful Relationship.
Right.
But that happened a lot with British publishing, which was behind Europe. When I did Catan, it was French, and even though it was written in medieval French, it was easier to read than some of the English stuff that was being printed at that time, because it was just easier to use those particular. It was easier to see, for example. Whereas if you look at the fonts, typefaces, and things like that in England, they were really backward, really heavy on ink, and very difficult to read. And some of Hayden, you had to look at really carefully because the ink had seeped through to the back, to the page, making it harder to read. But I mean, I got there in the end.
Oh, wow.
And it all makes sense. It's now something you can sit down with a big book on your and read, and it does contain, a Rosicrucian view of the world, which a lot of people have lost because, it's been replaced by 19th century Rosicrucianism, which is a lot cleaner and brighter and new agey. I mean, when you compare it to, say, the Rosicrucianism talked in the Kybalion, you can see how bad it's gone. As a tradition, it's suffered. And so people are talking about visualization. Hayden had another one which I thought was interesting. I'm not sure how far to take this, but he had 72 dreams. He lists 72 dreams. And
it's a good number.
Yeah, it's a very important number. And it's not one I think he chose it deliberately. And I think if you look at it, he describes each of the dreams in symbolic form, from 72 to 1, or actually 1 to 72. But if you place them in order, you could easily see a ladder of visualizations going up to the top. So you could say, the bottom one is the lowest form of realization or understanding, and the top one is some kind of spiritual awakening. It seems to be, if you knocked these into path workings, you could easily knock them into path workings, and you'd have a spiritual path working landscape you could use.
Of 72.
It has nothing to do with dreams. So it talk about going around Shikamparish, for example. And it could easily be aligned to that. I mean, I didn't want to, I put a lot of footnotes in this, but there were some ideas I thought wanted, a lot of them are historical. I wouldn't get too excited.
No, I love that stuff. You got the right audience here.
But he explaining why did he put this in, and why, when he's cut and pasted all of the geomancy from Catlin, why did he put this bit in? And it's so original, so different. And I haven't seen that anywhere else before. And then you start thinking, well, how can this be used? And that's what I think Hayden wanted. I don't think he intended it as a blind. I think he intended it for people to think about this, think about the numbers, which is, again, Hermetic, and go from there. And there is so much work to be done on this book, from this book, that it's really important to be out there. And that's why I think it was a pity. There's also magical images too. I almost drew them, but I thought, no, the book is big enough as it is. But he had all the magical images which are very similar to Agrippa, but some of them aren't. And you think, well, why is that? What's he trying to do here? And there's something quite clever that he's playing with. And he was a great fan of Agrippa, and you can see Agrippa being used in this book, but not quite the way that Hayden did it. And I think this is why he's important, and he should really be. I mean, there once was a time when I wanted this book, and I looked for it really hard. I'm really good at finding secondhand books, and I couldn't find these anywhere. I found one copy for, I think it was $600, which was too much. But, and I have the PDF hardbound as well, printed and hardbound as well. But the one I used was the one in America, because that seemed to be more complete.
it's a phenomenal amount of work that you must have done to bring that text to us and the modern audience. And so yeah, thank you for that and all the other work you've done. It's a fascinating, like it just going through all your books, and they take up a lot of space on my shelves, and I don't even have all of them, let alone all the Hermetic tablets. I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Well, some of them are out of
It's a
print now.
journey.
I
I
tried.
know. Don't even talk to me about that fact. Oh my God.
I was
Oh
so
my
sad
God.
because the Hermetic journals started out really promising. We were selling, 200 of them each time, which is nothing, but it was okay. But the last one, the last one I did, I was talked into it when two of my friends died, Jake Stratton Kent and Mike McGee, and so I thought I'd do an obituary edition because they're both written for the tablets over the years, and we sold 30. It's, it's not enough anymore to justify, and this
Yeah,
is one
that's
of
unfortunate.
the problems I'm finding with book publishing at the moment. I mean, there is no way that half the books I've written would be published by a mainstream publisher. So we set up me and a group of friends set up Lord Manticore to publish occult books that had we sell them through Lulu, but had no value as to a commercial publisher, but were vital for occultists. And so I got Pat Zaletsky on board. I got Christine Zaletsky. I got a few others who've written stuff, and I put all my books through there. And so the idea was to make these things available and keep them in print. I still have books published. My Helios book is published through, and is published. It was by Storm Constantine's book publishing, and there's a couple that are published through others, but most of my stuff's done through Manticore now because it gives me the freedom to write what I want. So I could write, a book, Why Magic Fails, because someone like Llewellyn, I'm not saying this, would want it positive. And I didn't want to write a positive book. I wanted to write, this is what goes wrong type book. And so it's easier for me to publish it under my own label. And
you certainly ruffled some feathers with that one, didn't you? I was really glad I had been waiting for it's a revision of and massive updating of the Gathering Magic. And it was long awaited, and I grabbed it as soon as it came out. It's over there. I haven't got a chance to read all the recent books of yours I've gotten the last couple of years, but I'm working on it. There's a lot of joy to still be had, and I do like the approach in that, and in When Magic Fails. It's you cover topics so often that people are scared to cover, and that's something I'm very grateful for.
One of the things with that one is too busy, the TikTok generation's so busy saying, look, my magic always works, and it clearly doesn't. I mean, it's rubbish. But for someone to say, well, I've been doing this for 30 years and my stuff doesn't always work, and I look at why it doesn't always work, and there's lots of reasons why it doesn't always work. And if it did work, then TikTok witches would be able to repair their fridges with the headless one. It doesn't make sense. So we have to have some reason. We have to say, well, this is an experience. This is what, when you're doing these rituals, this can go wrong. And actually, rituals that go wrong are the funny things, because they're the ones that teach you the most. It's not often, if they work, it works.
Absolutely.
So but if it goes wrong, you're forced to think, well, why did it go wrong? Is there something wrong with me? Is there something wrong with astrology? Is there something wrong with I found, for example, some of the things that I discovered over the years was don't do a ritual during void of course, when the moon's void of course. Now that's taken a while. Nobody's ever told me that, but I've discovered that most of my rituals fail if a ritual is attempted during void of course. Dark of the moon, possibly you can get away with it. Full moon, but never void of course.
There's apropos of what you're saying, there's a viewer question. We have a good number of people watching, by the way, so thank you everyone for watching. Shoot your questions out as much as you want. We'll get to them all eventually. And so JG here says, I've read a lot of Nick's stuff and wonder what he thinks we as genuine practitioners can do to combat some of the decay we see in the occult scene, the stuff like Instagram, etc. I have a thought, if I can, I'll share after on that, but go ahead.
Well, one of the problems is that they are something, they're like tests. So if you believe that somebody can fix their car by invoking the headless one, and you keep repeating their stories because it helps boost their ego, then you're contributing to it. So it's just simple to just shut up most of the time. And if you want to stick your neck out and say, look, that's ludicrous, it's fine too. I mean, I always remember when I was a kid, and this is a Nick Farrell kid story. So there was a group of us in BOTA, and we used to meet in a Plunkett Hall study group, and everybody in the group except me and another guy were all frantic new age healing types, and they were not happy unless they had found they were sick because they had something they could cure. You know, oh, I've got flu, I've been treating it with bumblebee juice, and I go on and on. And then one week, one woman came in and she said she had flu and she cured it by drinking her own urine. And at that point, I just burst out laughing, and I couldn't stop laughing. And it was really rude, and I said sorry, but I couldn't stop laughing. And I think that's what this needs more of. I think more of these sort of would-be queens of the underworld need to have the piss taken out of them a lot more. And then I don't think they'll stop because they've got such a vested interest in it, but at least everyone else will think they're ridiculous rather than you giving them value. And also they might have something important to say, and that's important too. So you have to listen to them before you laugh at them. You have to listen to them so that you can come up with a reason why it doesn't work. So for example, someone tells you that they can start a car by invoking the Bornless one. You can tell them, while in the time that it takes for you to invoke the Bornless one, your car, which you previously flooded, has calmed down a bit. So that doesn't prove anything. You know, you've started the car as it would have normally have done. And so you can induce rationality into the argument, which is always good for a laugh, because they hate rationality. But also,
which is odd because it's such a part of our tradition.
It should be, yeah, but it isn't. A lot of it, you can see a lot of it. Again, I hate to say it's Americans, but there's also a breed of witch.
I'm Canadian, so let loose.
Yeah, I know. I'm not insulting you.
No, I know, but we love talking about America.
I'm saying this fundamentalist approach where you think everything has to be written and clearly described and has to be done by writ, and it isn't. There's a lot more flexibility. It's much more like science. Science, if we followed science in the last 50 years has changed dramatically from what it was, you know, after the Second World War, and even more if you go further back, because people are sitting, researching, and trying stuff out. What they're not doing is saying, or shouldn't be saying, is it's always been like this, or it always works. There's no absolutes in magic, and I think people look for absolutes, and that's very sad. But this isn't a tradition where they can look for absolutes. Church is a good place to look for absolutes, but not magic.
It makes me when you say that, it makes me think of the issues arising from the resurgence or re-exploration of the original Golden Dawn system, right? In the church, you get given dogma, and we see with the with people studying original manuscripts more, with us posting them on Golden Dawn groups and discussing them, and people now, they don't. People can go look at original manuscripts of the LRP and realize, oh, hey, this stuff that I'm doing was clearly added in later on, right? Like who first started doing the sign of the Enterer in the LRP? I don't know. No one's been able to tell me.
Banishing. My favorite one is the banishing. It was, for some reason, I don't know why. It was years ago now, but I decided, why do we use the banishing? And I looked at all the original Golden Dawn knowledge lectures where the pentagram ritual, lesser ritual of the pentagram, was spoken of, and it never mentioned a banishing, or if it did, it was a footnote. And what I came to realize was that the banishing, the way it's used, was being used. It isn't being used quite so much now, because I think I managed to make an impact. I'm not sure. Still, people talk about the banishing.
I think so.
It wasn't there. And you now banish. The Golden Dawn always banished in space that they didn't feel safe. So you only use it in those circumstances. But Israel Regardie thought it was a good way to cleanse yourself of negative influences. So he has you doing them every time you cough.
I wonder if that was from Crowley, because I did, after reading, after getting my own knowledge updated over the last 10 years, due to all the great work that people like you and everyone else have done, and diving into more original manuscripts myself, updating that knowledge led me to search amongst Crowley because we often see things like, we see Mather's method of working the aethers in Crowley. We don't see that in surviving Golden Dawn manuscripts, unfortunately, but we do see it in Crowley.
Well, yeah, but Crowley would have got it. Crowley would have got it from Bennett.
Right, exactly. So my point is, before I lose it,
banishing pentagram.
Yeah. So I looked to Crowley to see, because obviously a lot of the stuff he would have been doing right after he left the order would have been stuff that methods he learned in the order, right? That's why he pronounces Enochian the Golden Dawn way and didn't come up with some other way. He has the nuanced long and short sounds that we see from notes by Westcott and other places. So we see it's much more nuanced than later people understood it to be. So the question is really, well, in Crowley, we see this LBRP followed by an LRP. We see this frequent use of LBRPs. So I wonder if it made me wonder if there was some developing, because as rituals are used more and more by people, they change in how they're used, right? If a bunch of people are finding them to be helpful in this way. So the question is, maybe the LBRP did come into more frequent use as an opening ritual. But I do see it followed then by I was surprised to see how frequently it was followed then by an LIRP back to back, which normally you or I would probably not tell people to do. Like, if you need an LBRP, that you should do an LBRP. If you don't need an LBRP, an LIRP is perfectly fine and more appropriate to the situation, right? You don't need to double up on everything.
The Fari Ra Temple never did a lesser banishing ritual pentagram at all, ever.
Yeah,
it might have done it. Might have done it when they were closing, but I never got back to somebody on that. But that was not the same thing as doing before a ritual. You do a pentagram, and the other Fari Ra offshoot doesn't either. So I think when you're looking at these things, I'm pretty sure. I don't know about Crowley. I hadn't really assumed him, but it does seem to me a psychological approach, because you are trying to clear your mind, and it is actually quite good for that. I mean, I tell people who are suffering from obsessions or things like that to do a banishing pentagram, because it helps clear. But you don't want to do it too much. I mean, Annie Horniman wrote a letter saying that if you do a banishing too much, it does weaken the magnetism in your sphere of sensation. Now, whether or not that's true or not, it does actually explain. A lot of people have told me that they were doing a banishing pentagram for years, and they, after a while, it just felt that it wasted them. And I've got to admit, I think that if you're going to do a banishing pentagram, you do it for 6 weeks, not any longer, because
Yeah,
6 weeks seems to be about the maximum.
Yeah, I started doing it from Regardi's Tree of Life, and then I got Don Craig's Modern Magic, and it's just LBRPs. So for the first year, I was just doing LBRPs, and I think if it wasn't for the counterbalance and then BRHs, and if it wasn't for the counterbalancing, and I really enjoyed and I think that it was the analysis that counterbalanced that, because I think I was losing energy and losing steam the further I went along in the system of Don Craig. And by the time I got to the point where he has your self-declaration of adepthood ritual, things went quite haywire, full on, really in the ceremony me and my little high school Wiccan coven tried to do that in. There was basically a full-on sort of spirit apparition attack, you could say. Well, one of those moments in life that made me realize how real and scary this stuff could be if you don't know what you're doing, or if you're taking it maybe too loosey-goosey, which I was not taking it loosey-goosey. I was very serious about this all. It was my life, even as a young teen. But I still realized even I don't necessarily understand the depths of seriousness and preparation necessary to do some of these things. And even if some of it's just making a simple declaration out of a book, that can actually really draw some forces that will challenge you and what you're doing, especially if you are called to this path. I think there's spirits that might be looking after you that you might see as oppositional to your work, that are just there to say, hey, you're not really ready for this, let's take you down a notch. And that's happened throughout my magical career, and I see that as a sign of success, actually, not failure, right?
Yeah.
Like with Ewan Campbell, everyone's like, oh, he played with Enochian and got messed up, and you pointed out you have to be really good to be able to cause that kind of damage to yourself.
Yeah. And he, to be fair, he also had huge problems to start with. Ewan Campbell was very, very bright, but he was a binge drinker, and a really serious binge drinker. And I'm not sure if it happened before or after the event that Dion Fortune described. She was not involved. She heard the story. She described it in her book, Psychic Self-Defense. Psychic Self-Defense is really funny now. If you've been on the magical path for a long time and you read Psychic Self-Defense, you see how much bullshit she wrote. I mean, she just made stuff up because she was writing an occult pot boiler. And I would have thought, part of me wishes, you could still do that. You could still sit down at your typewriter, cobble together a few of these stories, and make them real. And she's obviously enhanced one. I mean, the one she wrote about geomancy is priceless.
Remind me.
She said that she started doing geomancy as per the Golden Dawn, and she did the invocation to the earth elemental, and she started doing the dots. And then all at once, there was a sudden terrible smell of drains, and she started feeling sick and disorientated and everything else. And so she shut down the ritual, because that was what you're supposed to do, and told her teacher about it. And she reached the conclusion that it was because geomancy was supposed to be done on the earth, and she'd invoked an earth elemental, and it's supposed to be done on the earth and not with a pen and paper. And that's why she never touched it again. And I thought, thousands of people have done that ritual. thousands of people have done geomancy rituals. I mean, I use geomancy dice. I do not poke things in the ground, and nobody's really seriously done that since the 16th century. So, for her to write that is just absolute nonsense. And those are sort of pot boilers that she used to come out with. And some of her stories were true, some of them weren't. Her descriptions of Mina Mathers, I think, were probably true.
So interesting, yeah. There was a few things I took from Psychic Self-Defense when I read it ages ago. I should reread it and see enjoy it from the perspective you're now describing. But there was a few things that I could identify very easily and try out and realize, oh, this works, and I used those. But yeah, she had a fantastical side to her writing, which made made her a great person for me to read, like from age 14 to 17. It was a fun person to read, but I could tell that she took a lot of liberties that were apparent in some of her.
Give you a good example, actually, of now, if the banishing ritual, the pentagram, was a thing, right, as a full, doing the full ritual. Dion Fortune in that book describes doing the banishing pentagram at a force that was in a statue that came to get her. So she did a banishing pentagram, just the banishing pentagram and the name, and that was it. And she said there was a big pop and it went away. So that's not a full-on standing by the quarters, anything else thing. That is just, I'm going to do a pentagram and vibrate a divine name at it, which is probably closer to what it should have been if she was being attacked.
Yeah, I mean, Rigardi describes that in his rendition of the Pentagram lecture. And I can't recall if I think that's in the Fade Ra manuscripts. Just putting a pentagram between you and a opposing force or a distracting spirit or entity. I think that's there.
Yeah, and then doing the sign of silence and covering yourself with a blue light in your sphere.
Yeah.
That's the normal thing. The sign of silence was much more important for dealing with at a basic level.
Well, one thing I found, of course, through my early practices, I guess up as I was heading into Portal, it wasn't until Portal the significance of Harpocrates and the sign of silence really dawned on me. Of course, it would dawn on me further when I discovered more advanced, Z formula rituals that incorporate that god, of course. But just in Portal, I started to realize, every time I just realized from doing this wasn't something I read. I realized, every time I'm doing the sign of silence, I should be in the god form of Harpocrates. And of course, if anyone knows that now who's read Zalesky's Golden Dawn rituals and commentaries, these things are very clear to a modern audience. But back in 97, 98, it was not so easy to find out these things. And unless you had a magician teaching you who had also experienced it, you wouldn't read this in a book. And that was something that I was like, the power of that practice of using this, what a lot of people would call a mudra, really, right? If they want the Eastern language, to trigger this state that you've meditated on and developed for years with this protective god form and all the various ideas and attributes that come along with that protection and ability to hide inside the lotus, as it were, like the child Horus, right? So that is where I find a lot of the magic and power to be in those techniques. How they trigger a state that we've developed or discovered or unlocked within ourselves, and that's where a lot of that power comes from, rather than the exact shape I might draw, or even the name vibrated, which a lot of people, because names get changed. Some people change the Hebrew to Greek. Some people we change the interface and the accoutrements, the outward expressions of these things. So again, as an anthroposophist still at heart, I'm always looking for what's the inner state of the soul that I'm looking to experience for such and such a reason. And Steiner never talks about that magically explicitly, but it doesn't take much attention to realize how it can apply magically. And that actually brings me to something I wanted to ask you. As another thing I wanted to ask you, though I think as soon as I said that, I've forgotten it. That's possible. I got up quite early today to do this with you, and thanks again for taking the time. It's in the evening where you are. What was the question? Darn it. Okay.
Has anyone else got any questions that we can throw in while he remembers it?
You know, there's one. I'll scroll back here and see. There hasn't been a lot. I think people are mostly spellbound by our deep dive into. Yeah, no. People are here. I mean, well, it's not very often people like us talk about this stuff, especially publicly. So it's a special day. One question that someone wanted to ask me, I asked some friends going into this if there was questions, and people, especially younger magicians in the tradition, always love to hear about experiences, of course. But this was interesting to me as well. So the question was about what were your early magical experiences that really convinced you this was the path and the most real path for you in life, and then what were the experiences in the Golden Dawn system? Because you didn't start in the Golden Dawn, you started elsewhere. And what was it in the Golden Dawn that convinced you that particular path? So what's the initial magical experiences that convinced you magic was for you? And then what was it in the Golden Dawn tradition that made you realize that this was your life path, that this system in particular was for you?
It's quite tricky because I started out as a kid. I was fundamentalist Christian, which is one of the reasons why I've got so many problems with it.
Oh, really?
But the reason I stopped was, I mean, I took it very serious. I took Christianity very seriously, and I studied it. And that's the last thing you should do with an organized religion.
I like
and
that.
The more I studied it, the more holes I found, and more it became and I started noticing people around me. I didn't like them. I didn't want to be like them. And so I remember once because I used to have semi-mystical experiences. And one day I had one where I was I suppose it's a visualization. I was talking to Christ, which is what we were encouraged to do in this particular group. And I said, look, I can't believe in this bollocks anymore. I think there's something better out there for me. I'm going to find it. And I didn't have a feeling that it was like hellfire and brimstone from this conversation. So I left, and the first thing I wanted to do, and it was really bizarre, I had a real craving. I wanted to own a set of tarot cards because they terrified me. And, you know, to fundamentalist Christian, I wanted a tarot set. So I went into a bookshop called Mystic Manor in New Zealand. It isn't there now. And I got a set of BOTA cards because they were black and white and they were cheaper. And the guy behind the counter said, oh, do you know these guys, you know, they hold meetings out in Nainai. I thought, okay, I'll go have a look. And that was it. I mean, they're a good, gentle way to get into magic. They talked a lot about magic, but they didn't do much. I did some of their early initiations, and they were quite spectacular. I mean, it's not because they were magical; they were psychologically spectacular on me. And after that, I liked the whole thing. I like the dressing up. I like speaking in the proper tones and later on the God forms and things like that. So it was much more. I'm a triple Leo, so it's a much more Leo way of approaching spirituality. And from there, you know, there was a pattern. First BOTA, then I went to Hawke's Bay, and then I went to England where I joined SOL, Servants of the Light.
Okay.
I worked with David Goddard for a while, and then he left, and then I left from him, and I was on my own for a bit, and I was wondering what I was going to do, and I thought, you know, I knew the Ciceros because I'd met them I'd run some workshops for them. And although I knew about the Golden Dawn, obviously, there wasn't anything running. So I went and joined their temple, because what I was looking for was a complete system. See, SOL is really good, it was really good, I don't know what it's like now, at doing inner stuff. So you're doing astral work, you're doing visualizations, you're doing path workings and stuff like that. What it wasn't quite so good at, I was lucky because I was in one of their more serious ritual groups, but what it wasn't good at was heavy ritual approach. And so I wanted a balance between the two. So when I went into Golden Dawn, I wanted to be able to get a complete system, or what I thought was a complete system. And that kept me occupied until I got to the 5-6, and then I got walloped really spectacularly. That one threw me off course for about 7 years.
Wow.
I was writing, I was initiating people, but I was not doing much practical stuff during that period. And then suddenly I woke up one day and that's what I wanted to. I wanted to do this seriously. I'd always also wanted to write about occultism. So if you look at the first 2 books I did, which is Talismans and Magical Imagination, that's me in SOL. Later on, you know, it becomes either the stuff I've experimented on or the stuff that done. So Golden Dawn stuff. There's history stuff which I don't count, but it was interesting because somebody wrote a book about Farrell in New Zealand, and they dismissed my book because they said, "Oh, Nick Farrell, he's biased because he's a practitioner." And you think, well, yeah, but that's the only way you're really going to understand it. You know, you're not going to.
Let's face it, you could never understand art by talking to an artist, or blacksmithing by talking to a blacksmithing. What nonsense, right? You would never ask someone who knows about the thing it's so crazy. It's
got to be an academic approach, which is the academic approach is that, you know, well, this happened, this happened there, they thought this, and it's not you have to work out why they thought this, and it makes no sense unless you this is one of the reasons why I have this problem with people who think they know the Golden Dawn ritual and they haven't actually done one.
Oh yeah.
You get lectured to by a lot of people who tell you, you know, Golden Dawn does this. My favorite one again is the people who tell me, the Golden Dawn invoking pentagram, that's Earth. That's invoking Earth. No, it isn't. Never was. But you would know that because you're never told it. I mean, the good thing about this is why secrecy is so funny. The good part about secrecy is you can tell someone in the 0-0 exactly what a lesser ritual, the pentagram, does. You know, that's invoking pentagram, that's banishing pentagram. And the student goes, yeah, thank you. I like that. Yeah, I'll use that. But if you have added in lots of inner order stuff, or people have read too many books, they start to think, well, that's invoking Earth. Why is moving... my SOL teacher couldn't work out why invoking water was banishing air and things like that. You get into you head into all sorts of things which doesn't need to be there, because if you had been following the system, you wouldn't have been told it, so you wouldn't need to worry about it. So yeah, you get these people telling you this is an elemental pentagram, or the angels are in the wrong place, the divine names are in the wrong place. Behind me is the pentagram, that sort of thing. I've had arguments with other Golden Dawners about whether or not behind me, above me, within me, or between the pillars is the six-rayed star in that ritual. Doesn't matter. They're all part of. They're all a reference to the same part of the ritual. They're all a reference to the naught, where the candidate stands between the pillars and their higher genius is above them or inside them or behind them. It doesn't matter. It depends on how the Hierophant is visualizing it. So
yeah, well, it's I that's the thing I've always said to people in the last decade or so, is because my experience was in it. I joined the Golden Dawn not because I wanted to join the Golden Dawn, just because I wanted to be around serious occultists. I had outgrown my little Wiccan coven that I created, of course, because my classmates or my friends from high school, they just wanted to do rituals to get laid or get girlfriends or become powerful, and my rituals were all like aimed at wisdom or insight or spiritual transformation. So eventually I realized, I need to find some adults, and I was lucky to be led into a temple, and it was a long journey to get in, and I was lucky to just be around adults who sort of knew more than me, and that was all I needed. But then in the process, of course, I did fall in love with the Golden Dawn tradition. At first I was like, what are all these officers and robes and tools? Like, come on. I just wanted the magic. But then of course I started to understand. Yeah, go ahead.
I liked the theatre, the rituals, and everything else. I still think the Golden Dawn is over-tooled, but I think the same thing applies to Solomonic magic as well. There's too many weapons for what you're trying to do, and I mean, you make them, and they are the pinnacle of your, outer order experience. But I don't tend to use them that much, and I've seen Farrell people, they kept them, but they, I didn't see them being used that much. Now, I could have been wrong. I may not have just been around, but I think there is a certain point where you can over-tool it. I mean, I've gone down to one wand, one dagger, a bowl of water, and an incense burner, and lots of candles. I think actually one of the things that I've learned since being since I started was that magic was not so much doing one big ritual as doing little ones over a long period of time, preferably daily. Mm-hmm. So the rituals that I've done that had the most effect are the ones that I've done something every day. And so, for example, PGM has a ritual where you call an assistant, and it's done over a weekend, and it's very good. I mean, it's a nice ritual. I've tried it, but it's nowhere near as powerful and meaningful as lighting a candle every night to your assistant with a little invocation to the god that's behind it. And you slowly build this thing out of astral matter. It's ensouled by the god and you initiate it. It's ensouled and initiated by the god that you're using it for. And over the years, I think the only time I haven't done that candle ritual was when I was in hospital. And that's over 10 years. So it builds up a lot of grunt. And I think this is one of the things that people miss. So if you, for example, a house protection ritual, there are people who do a house protection ritual every year, if they're lucky. If you do it every week, it's much better. Preferably every day. I love the fact that you can, it's something that you could do if your kid is into magic. And I don't have kids, but if your kid is into magic, one way you could give them something to do is put them in charge of the house spirit and get them to do the little invocation every week or every day to the house spirit to protect the family. As a nice way to get them into it without being heavy on it, and house spirits like that sort of thing. And that's very close to what was done in ancient Rome as well, because the children, usually the male child in the family, would be in charge of looking after the house spirit, and they would make sacrifices on the house to the house spirit, who would then protect the family.
That's really cool. That's really cool. I just want to give you a little one listener, a dear friend Durail Lukes, says he's loving this conversation. Thanks for making this happen. See, I told you, people are just, it doesn't matter how we approach this podcast, people are going to love it, just whatever we talk about, because this is it's, again, people don't get into the weeds much. Jorge Quinones is a good friend as well, and he actually comes from the parallel order for me in the 90s in LA. I was in the Zinc, he was over with Chris Monastre, and he has a great question for you, actually. He's because we all know that you've done things like tweak the 3 = 8, I believe, and replaced with Greek gods. You're a big lover. Yeah, the whole thing. Okay, well, I don't know the ins and outs of your order, of course.
Nought's pretty much the same, but
you're welcome to show me your rituals if you ever want to.
one of the things that you realize is that it's incredibly flexible. If you don't take stuff away, you can add stuff, and so yeah, I have I'm not, as I've got older, I've got bored with Kabbalah, and that's a bit of heresy for those within the Golden Dawn system. And the reason
I think we all go through periods like that.
No, it's more than a period, believe me.
Okay.
Part of the problem is that you reach a certain point in it, and it stops being the catalog system that you started out with. And I found myself busy working on a paper I was doing, and it was actually around the same time as I was into Enochian, and which I also got bored with. And I suddenly realized, why am I getting obsessed about Jewish holidays? Because, it's nothing to do with my religion. I can understand why this 14th day of Nisan is very important, and all these things. And it's just not, that's not nowhere near my religion. I mean, even if I was going back to Christianity, it's not Judaism. And that's a particular type of Judaism which sees something as very important. And it's not mine. And I thought, well, how can I can't get into this. Not because it's just not me. And just like I couldn't get into Roman Catholicism if I put my mind to it. Whereas whenever I hang around pagan energies, I'm not talking about sorts of groups where people are banging drums, and I mean, when I was in Rome, we went to there's a temple of Venus, just outside, Venus in the underworld, just outside Rome, and it's there. You can feel that old energy, and it's something that's more me. So it's logical that when I do magic, that I am using those particular god forms rather than I also use Egyptian stuff too, because I've got a long time connection with Egypt, so it hasn't changed much. But I don't like Mathis's approach to Egyptian god forms. I think his stuff is too why would you have so many different names for one god? And it's clearly the same god. So, but yeah, I follow a sort of pagan approach to it. to most things, and it's also Neoplatonic. So I'm interested in. I still have the idea of one God that's behind everything. Then a male and female, which is from the Chaldean oracles, to step the power down, and then you've got the usual, Greek, Roman, Egyptian gods, all nicely catalogued, but I don't necessarily follow it into a pure Kabbalah anymore. And I certainly can't be bothered. I spent a lot of time trying to crack Hebrew Kabbalah, and it didn't really do anything for me. I mean, it's the same with Greek Kabbalah, and I like Greek because it's got vowels, but Hebrew Kabbalah, so what if something is numbered this? It doesn't tell you anything. If one God means this number and this God means another number, what are you getting out of that? Other than, oh, I feel really, really clever. And I don't see it as an advantage. But I mean, some people I know, one person I know has got really into the number system and gets something out of it. And I think, well, good for her, but I can't do it. I'm certainly not number literate. I was lucky to scrape school C maths, and I was really pleased. I remember I got a C, and I thought I passed. Numbers and me do not go, whereas I'm okay with words and letters.
Yeah, some people love numbers. Like I've had friends who love numbers. They have all their numbers memorized. Every credit card they've ever had, they've got them memorized. They just love them. And I think for some people, especially therefore, that method of Kabbalah, that aspect of Kabbalah is very enticing and fulfilling. And for me, it was never that compelling. I understand, the equal numbers would show sympathy between these two things. And if you see Kabbalah or Hebrew as the divine language, of course, then it's very easy to put a lot of stock in that. But,
I can't see
for
that.
for those of us who it's not our native language, it's just another language, maybe a sacred language, but then what's to say not all language is sacred, right? Certainly it's all connected to the logos. Why would one language be more connected than another language to the logos? And the irony of ironies, of course, is we see in the Hermetica, where within the Hermetica it says itself, this must be read in Egyptian because that's the sacred language, and in any other language what we're saying makes no sense, and you're reading this in Greek. In a Greek later translation, right? So right away you're like, oh, I'm removed from the very thing the text is telling me to understand. But the Golden Dawn, I have also learned, is much more hermetic than I used to think. For many years I thought, how hermetic is the Golden Dawn? Not very. Now I've completely changed my view on this because I know the Hermetica better. And I'd say your view on God, gods, and the universe is just a very hermetic view, honestly. When people say, is it pagan or Christian? Well, the Hermetists didn't seem to have that quandary of like, is Jesus the savior? So, well, he's a savior, but what do you mean by the? Is Jesus a god? Well, of course, why not? Lots of people are gods. Why, but is he the God? What does that even mean? What are you talking about? Right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of us in the Golden Dawn are. Well, that's what the Hermetica says. It says we're gods, we're dying gods in these bodies, and our nous is a daimon, which is like a star god or angel. And when we die, if we're initiated, then our dying god soul joins with our daimon nous to become like the star gods, but better because we're also dying gods. So we're two times gods, whereas star gods and angels are just one time god, and we're double gods. We're like double gods. I mean, it's very optimistic and very very inspiring stuff, the Hermetica.
Anyone else on a question?
Yeah, is there more questions? We're heading into the end of the show as we go here. Hopefully we can do this again sometime. Maybe after I've read some of the John Hayden text, Geomagica, your new book. That's very, very. It's exciting because I have very little idea what to expect. But I'm a big lover of that time period. I'm a big lover of the way in which Rosicrucianism changed and went through vicissitudes from the publications of the manifestos to modern day to up to Amort for all it is. for all it's worth, and it does have its value for sure. Definitely is a venue to bring people together and help people connect, and
or
has a big
filter them,
museum.
or filter them out.
Filter them out. It is what it is. I mean, it's like the TikTok witches or the pop culture occultism. I honestly don't rag on that stuff. There was a time when I started to, and I was corrected by some witches around me at PantheaCon, and they're like, hey, this commercialization is what allows us to have these big conferences. And actually
Yeah,
that
but
brings us to the point of,
but is the big conference the goal?
it's not the goal, but I got to go to this conference, speak about Yeats's Order of Celtic Mysteries to
So it was
200
ego.
people. Well, no, it's
So
a chance to meet people.
you're saying the TikTok witches are important because they support your ego.
No. They're important because they create the economy that allows us to get together in person with other people that we normally couldn't spend time with, that we normally wouldn't be able to get together with. So, getting to go to a conference and hang out and talk with other magicians whose works I've been reading for decades was an amazing experience. I think it's the only big conference I've been to.
Yeah, the Enochian one I can see because there are some really good people there, but there are some really dodgy conferences. There's some really dodgy conferences out there with people who, you would probably not want to spend money to be in the same room with. And I mean,
I wish I knew more about those.
Oh, you don't want to. But I went to one. I went to one in London, and I walked into a room. The whole room smelt of dope, and at the end there was a woman and a man providing the music, and she was singing or chanting, "We come from the goddess," and he was going boom 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 on bongos, and then she says, "From her womb," boom 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 boom, and they went on for about half an hour. And there were all lots of people around with black t-shirts and little silver pentagrams, and it was so far removed from anybody actually talking anything real.
I mean, sounds a little bit.
That's the first time I heard the word postmodern. It's the first time I ever heard the word postmodern used in an occult conversation. Oh, that's a postmodern thing. What the? What is that? Is that a new way of holding your wand or something?
Well, yeah, that's postmodern. Is of course.
I know what it is.
Usually, you know what it is. It's going to people. I'm seeing people popularly will use it to refer to anything that's been disrupted, and whatever. Yeah, well, so you wrote an article on conferences, and people all reached out to me and were like,
"I didn't write that. No, I didn't write that. That was my wife."
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, you'll find this hilarious because people reached out right away and were like, "This came right after you did your Enochian conference. I think he's writing it about you." And I said, "Does he mention me and my conference?" They're like, "No." I'm like,
"Did you have a DJ?"
Well, he would have given me a shout out. He would have given me a shout out if he was writing it about me, because you don't know me personally. This is the first time we've been face to face, but I'd like to think that if you were talking about me, you'd give me a link. You'd give me a little shout out, baby.
Did you have a DJ? That's
of course not.
The point.
Of course not. Yeah, no, of course not. But we did have, because we're in Vancouver, we did have access to literally every drug decriminalized. But no one had time to do stuff like that. We all had to be up at 7 a.m. to go to lectures at 8 a.m. because we were doing it at UBC, not through UBC, at UBC. And therefore we only had 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So we had to fit in all these dense lectures into a short time period. Next year, that'll be different. Next year, we'll have more time, and there'll be a bit more breathing room when we do it in Austin, Texas next year in November 2026. That's the announcement, folks. You've heard it here. It's I'll be signing the papers on the venue in the next week or two. So that's happening. But we had a good time. We're not going to have a DJ. You know why we did? Well, first of all, I'm not a DJ person, obviously. But the reason we didn't even have as much music as I would have liked. Wish we had more time for music, but the music, we decided I was going to hire some local famous musicians who I know, because We have so many in Vancouver, and they're always happy to get out of bed for a couple $100. But Joe Peterson was like, you know what he said? He said to me, he said that my favorite conference I've ever been to, we had a jam. I was like, jamming's the best. That's the best thing. I'm a musician. Jamming is the height of musicality. If you actually talk to musicians, that's the height. Not a performance of your best piece, not a perfect orchestration of a complex symphony. No, the best music is a jam. And so we just jammed a bit, while we had our little evening festivities, which were always done by like 9 p.m. because everyone had to get up so early. I want to have more fun next year, a little more loosey goosey. But we had to fit in a lot of lectures into a short amount of time.
I think the fact you fitted in a lot of lectures gives it a lot more credibility. Because I mean, people.
It was a slog. Like my thanks to everyone who attended, because like it's challenging. It's as hard as grad school. Like I remember when I first went to grad school, and my first class of the day is 3-hour lecture. Second class of the day is a 3-hour lecture. Then if there's an evening class, guess what? It's a 3-hour lecture, and you go home, stare at your pillow, and you're like too traumatized to even lie down. You're just looking at the pile of books and all the reading you have to do, and you're like, what have I done to myself? And then you do that every single day for years. And I like that we captured a little bit of that intensity, because magic is intense, and I think studying magic should be a little bit intense, even when it's just the theory.
I think the best thing I ever saw was in the Golden Dawn Conference 1997. They were all lectures, but then they had a break, and in the break we went to a room and performed Waits 0-0. So everyone could sit around and watch it, and it was all done by HOGD people, and it had a hell of a grunt. I mean, it probably had more grunt than Waits' version had, but it was all there. I mean, admittedly, all reading from scripts, but it was all really good stuff. And I think that sort of break, where you're actually doing something practical. I mean, what would have been interesting for me if you're doing an Enochian one is to, path work onto an ether, look into a crystal. We
will be doing that.
Getting out of that sort of stuff, and then because then when people, it means that people are working on something practical and something, and it's one of the things that I think you get out of your head when you do those sorts of things, and they're quite fun. I mean, also if you give people a job to do it. One of the SOL conferences used to be, and they're really big ones, but they used to have a ritual where everybody had a part, even if it was a line. So they did the judgment, the 42 assessors of Osiris, and everybody, who wasn't an assessor was a god. It was huge. The whole hall was full of all these people doing these different god forms, and it was cool fun. And the rest of the conference was all lectures as normal, but it was a break from that, and you got a chance to do something that's actually in line with what you're doing. I think what Paula was concerned about was this whole let's try and attract people for the entertainment, and not let's try and attract people for the study and the hard slog and perhaps practical uses of magic. And I think she's got a point. And I think there's a big problem here, because we're seeing, people with 1 or 2 years experience running conferences, because they've got experiences as conference organizers, but they're not magicians. And I mean, of course, if they did anything practical, I'd love to see what happened. But that's something. It's all about, do you have the stalls in place? Do you have the party? Do you have little sausages on a stick? That sort of stuff, and it loses the momentum of the magic. But maybe I'm just getting old.
I think that's also one of the problems that happens when the conferences are put on by people who are trying to make a living off of it, or make money off it. I've had friends who've done occult conferences who are really surprised and sad to see that they didn't have any money to show afterwards for themselves. They were hoping it would pay for their cut would cover a vacation, for example. I'm not going to name names or anything, but I was like, oh, well, fair enough. You do a ton of work. I can see how you'd want that. But one thing that led up to me doing the way I'm doing mine, because I asked Aaron Leach and some other attendees about some changes I might make for next year, but they actually had no comment. They said, we don't even know how to have an opinion on this change or that change for next year, because we've never seen anyone do something like this the way you're doing it before. You're just doing it a completely different way, and so we can't even advise you. And I was like, okay, well, that sucks, but I'll make the best decisions I can. And but the thing that has informed me is learning from other people who have, who are doing it either as a full-time career, which puts a lot of pressure on stalls, on entertainment, on all those things, versus me. I'm doing this because my own personal business and job is going so well. I can afford to spend the money I would spend going to a conference somewhere on my own conference. I can lose like $3 to $5 grand of my own money, no problem, and then just put on something that's going to be really good for the community and hopefully bring connections together. And next year we're going to be able to actually, we won't be at a university campus, which we were this year. Thank you, UBC, for letting me rent rooms. That was awesome. Or a room. Next year we'll have multiple rooms. We'll be based out of a building that is very germane to what we're doing. I won't announce it till after I sign.
In a graveyard, is it?
And we'll have, yeah, exactly. We're going to be
graveyard.
We're going to be at the Texas graveyard. So silly. But we'll have multiple rooms. So we'll have breakout rooms. We'll have rooms where there could be a scrying workshop. We'll have rooms there can be practices. We can have that stuff, and we'll have some very cool people who are open to guiding those sort of things. I wanted to get Lon Milo Duquette to do an Enochian thing in person, but he says he's not up for traveling much anymore, so he'll have to be remote. But Ashen Shasan has confirmed he'll present and attend, and hopefully maybe he can do a scrying workshop or something interesting. I definitely want to have practical things as well as just theoretical lectures, so that's going to be exciting. I'm really glad I brought this up to you, because I feel bad that I didn't have a chance to read your article or your wife's article yet. I'm sure it'll be a fun read. But I wanted to talk to you about this because I knew I would get some good ideas and inspiration for what would make these things good. We can do whatever we want, of course, and that's the freedom that I want to embrace with doing this in a different way. And of course, the way I'm doing it is structurally different to other conferences. The way, which is good. It's designed to benefit presenters as much as possible, and that's doable because I don't need to get anything out of it. I just want to have a fun time and learn a lot. Yeah, and in person, I think is, we're losing the in-person world, and that's the scariest thing to me as a latter-day Gen Xer and a person who grew up without cell phones and computers, right? Like, we just didn't have these things. And I love these things. I love the fact that we can be talking now a long distance like this with people watching, 20 people watching right now. Thank you, everyone. Amazing. Got a last question. Now's the time. Fire out some questions. This guy's a crazy man. He'll answer any question you ask him. We love him. Nick is Nick is famous for his hot takes. So please ask a fun question if you have one. If it's too crazy, I just won't ask it, but I'll probably ask it. So yeah, getting ideas from you about how to make these things fun and engaging and good for the community. I really want to leave a better occult community than I found it. And that's not that hard to do because
you went through the Golden Dawn Wars.
Exactly, right? Yeah. Like, I literally had to get off the throne of the Hierophant, or maybe I was Cancellarius at the time, and go to the front door of my building because the Sentinel was fighting with her claymore in hand an intruder by the name of David Griffin, who had broken in the front door and was trying to push his way into the temple during a neophyte ceremony where we had, there's 35 people in there, and like saying, I'm the ruler, I'm the leader. It's like, we never met this guy. We didn't know this guy. We had no idea. We barely had any idea.
He did that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was wild. It was wild. And so that was my only ever experience with David Griffin. So take it for what it's worth, people. But it was nuts. He tells the story in a very demeaning way toward us. But what the reality is, he came in, assaulted our Sentinel, and got kicked out. She only didn't run him through, she said, because it's Canada, not America. We don't have castle doctrine here. So you get in trouble if you fight with intruders under any circumstances. You punch a home invader, you're going to jail, not them. So we got to be careful. I know. Don't even get me started on the situation. We have a comment from Chris Foster here. He says, excellent content, engaging discussion, confirming parallels with a lot of interesting insight. Thank you, Fraters, for your service to this great art and all you do. Inspirational and honors. Thank you, Chris. That's a lovely thing to say. And yeah, there's a lot of nice comments and a lot of hellos. I'll just show you some of those. We have a Frater from Scotland. Being a Frater of SRIS, Inverness College, this conversation has become a little bit awesome. Okay, thank you. And I know that guy. I met him through through online, but I know he was involved with the Boleskine and stuff like that. So yeah, lots of great people saying great stuff. Someone like your STD analogy with passing on bad qualities from magical leaders. Yeah. There you go. Greetings from the Highlands. He loves your Mather's Last Secret, Star and Stone. Now, when it comes to Mather's Last Secret, let's clear up something publicly that was a long debate. Famously, Sam Scarborough said that your transcriptions of the Alpha and Omega initiations from Mathers were flawed and not usable and had to be redone. But that is not correct.
Terrible. No, it's not dead. The thing is that Sam had a habit of, if there was a comma I missed, Sam would say the whole thing would have to go back to the print. And I mean, it's not true. The NISI documents, which I got, were pretty ruthlessly covered. And no, there was nothing in there. There were some things that were added by, because I didn't do the first edition, some things that were added where they mixed some of the AO documents from the Slater collection, which I didn't have access to. But I gave them permission to do that so that the ritual would be more complete. But generally, they all of them were exactly what was written in NISI. And I really don't know what Sam was smoking when he said that. And I have had problems with Sam, particularly as in later years when he was deliberately starting to run down other people's work, and it was starting to get me across, which is why I stopped talking to him. And we never really had a chance to make up for it afterwards, because we were quite good friends at one point. So it was a bit sad. But no, there's nothing in those rituals that I added, took away, or anything. They were fine. And moreover, the guy that checked them was Darcy Kuntz. And Darcy Kuntz is an extremely anal editor. I mean that complimentary way. He was going through very, very thoroughly. So if I'd made a cock up, Darcy would have certainly have caught it.
Yeah, Darcy's not famous for being sloppy. Yeah, he's in Austin too, so hopefully I'm hoping we can get him to come do a presentation at the next EnokiaCon on the history and transmission and development of Golden Dawn Enokia, and that would be really amazing. He would probably be the guy to do that, to just sort of take people on a journey.
Enochian stuff.
Well, he's in Austin. They have an Enochian collection of manuscripts from JFC Fuller at Austin University where he works, so I think he's familiar with some of those documents, because those are some those are the documents that were published by Hellfire and that Fuller wrote the intro to, that are, I mean, they correct Regardi's mispronunciation, and show the actual Golden Dawn pronunciation, which you could see if you looked at Crowley's original Enochian writings, because he demonstrates the accurate way that the GD pronounced the language in those. But yeah, just some, everyone does the Call of the Portal. Everyone famously knows the Call of the Portal from Regardi. However, you look at the original GD manuscripts from JFC Fuller or these other guys, and it's very different. It's much more in alignment with the guidelines that Mathers actually set out, and even the guidelines that Dee set out. It's sort of a fusion of the two, what the original Golden Dawn seemed to be doing. Yeah. So someone's asked, what do you think about mottos in the Golden Dawn? Thank you, JG, for the question. I have no idea what to expect from your
it's like
this
one
question.
of those things. It's like it's I mean, they're a good idea, because when you're starting, you tell the neophyte, what do you want to get out of this? What's your aspirations? And that you make into a motto. That's a good idea. What it comes down to, though, is people talking in another language, where they don't, if they know the other person, in fact, I've never met anybody who knew another person's motto, and I only know my members' mottos because I've got them on a piece of paper in the filing cabinet. So practically, it's personal. So you can be Frater LVX, and that's something you're aspiring to. That's a good idea, but practically, it doesn't really do much. You don't change. It's not that aspirational. I don't think it's a necessary thing to do. It's like you also find people calling people Frater and Slora a lot, and I don't think that's particularly natural either. Even within a Golden Dawn framework, I think it's a bit outdated. It sounds very Masonic, and I don't necessarily think it certainly doesn't do anything magically. So, I mean, what I noticed was that in groups that I've been in, we didn't tend to refer to mottos. We didn't tend to call people Frater and Sorore. We just say hi, which is fine. You're not talking to the person's magical personality, so there's no real need for them. But because they're part of the traditional, I tell people to think of one. They change it again at Portal, and they change it again at the 5-6. Because their aspirations will have changed, or they can keep it. But I don't like it when people take other people's mottos. So if people take McGregor Mathis's motto, I think, what's the point?
Yeah, that doesn't really make sense. Get your own motto.
Yeah, there's lots of Lux and Tembrises, though.
Yeah, of course. The danger, one of the dangers I've seen manifest throughout the years is people identify with their mottos, and identifying with, object identification is famously psychologically damaging and causes schizoid fractures in your psyche, apparently. To identify with any object, whether it's a vision of yourself, a version of yourself, a name for yourself, or whatever constructed identity you want, because you remove yourself from that sort of liminal place of being who you are, and you're focusing on some version of yourself, or wealth or fame or your car or something like that. So mottos can be things that can become crutches, I think, or things that, they define your magical self, and then you're limited to that version of yourself, and that's all a projection, all a symbolical creation, and therefore is always going to be reductive of the true magnitude of the human soul, of your whole being, right? Your whole being is much more expansive than any name. Hopefully,
Yeah.
Hopefully,
even if
thou
it's a
art
divine
still
name,
nameless. Right. You want to be thou art still nameless unto eternity, is the way I look at it. But as tools, definitely can be powerful. Or Fred.
Yeah.
Or
one of Edward Simon.
I think one of the big spirits that Edward Kelly would always talk to, his name was Ben. The great spirit Ben. It's almost something out of Life of Brian. Oh, thou mighty Ben, please appear to me in the decanter which I've just distilled potatoes into vodka and gotten drunk off, and tell me the mysteries of the Enochian spirits. Like, this was a moment in Kelly's life. This actually happened.
When I wrote my novel, I made the name of God, the supreme name of God. What was it? Jeff. So it was just Jeff, and the supreme. So you had all these people saying, "What the Jeff is this?" and all these things. All the stuff came from this idea of God, because Jeff is a good name for a god, whereas Simon is a ridiculous name for a supreme being. and I think it worked. But nobody read the novel anyway, so.
Oh, oh, yeah. Well, so I tell students to meditate on the cross and triangle to receive a motto. I say, let it be something that comes from meditating on the symbols is my way of thinking, and focusing on your on your yehida, on your higher consciousness. And if you can come up with a name that
Your yehida is
connects you
supposed
with
to be
that,
above names. Your yehida is above letters and names, and that's if you're
yeah,
focusing on the divine.
So
you're not going to get information from that. It's got to come from something yesodic, yetzireric, and I don't know. This is where it gets complex, because I don't think it's one of those things I really don't think goes anywhere if you think about it too hard. And so all these sort of divine names and things like that are all yetziratic. They're not supreme divine, which is beyond all those
they're not
forms. So
no, they're
anything you're going to do is going to be limiting yourself to the astral anyway. So really, you could choose anything, and I mean, that's why
people do.
Yeah, and people do.
Yeah. Well, that's why I say I like to tell. The reason I tell people to focus on the highest is because I think that the name that might come to you in that meditation might be something that either helps you remember that striving to the highest, or helps you face challenges on your path towards that higher consciousness.
Yeah, but if you think about what you need to do in the outer, where you've got your grades, and you're really thinking about what your motto is, the things you should be doing in the outer is balancing your personality, and that makes a shit motto. I am balanced in fire. I don't if you think of all the things, weaknesses people have in the outer order before they get balanced, that's not the sort of thing that makes a very good motto, unless I suppose you could put it into Latin, and hope that nobody asks what it means. But say, for example, if you have a problem with communicating with people, say, your motto would be I communicate. That would be a reasonably good motto for the outer order, but it doesn't sound very good, unless even in Latin.
Yeah. You said that you didn't think the mottos were used that much in the old days, right? But I think
the
letters. Oh, they were. Okay, you didn't say that, so I just heard that in my own head, right? So yeah, because in the original old days, I just remembered, like, they used their mottos all the time. They signed, like, Yates was called Demon.
Yeah, they used to sign their letters and everything to it, and so therefore, when we look at the documents, we have to know what each person's motto was, and that just strikes me as a bit pretentious, because calling
they had more
Yates,
time on their hands.
Yeah, but calling Yates Dee,
Demon. He was often called Demon, like in most letters to him, it's like, Demon, the first name of his motto, which is kind of funny. You'd think that would be more something Crowley would want. Someone says another question. Here's another good question, because we're rapid fire questioning. How about the importance of secrecy in today's climate? Is it important at all? See, with your answer about mottos, which was as hot a take as you could have, now you've inspired people to be more daring in their questions. Secrecy today. I mean, so much of the stuff is published, but what do you think?
Secrecy. A friend of mine once told me that he stands on the corner in Christchurch, and was the Wizard of Christchurch. He dresses up as a wizard, and he just spouts forth funny things to passers-by. He's been doing it for decades. And I once interviewed him, and he said, "I don't believe in occultism." And I said, "That's very odd for a wizard." And he said, "Yeah, because occultism means secret. And if something's secret, there must be something wrong with it." And it's a very good point, because while things are kept secret, you can't discuss them on a wide plane. You can't expose them to reality. Now, early on today, we were talking about how secrecy had its uses, because it meant we could limit teaching to a particular level and a particular grade without there being a problem. But there are problems with secrecy generally. And you know this when someone tells you this is above your grade, this information you're asking is above your grade. That is secrecy wrong. Because if you're able to ask the question, theoretically you should be able to receive the answer if you're ready for it. Now, again,
that's exactly what Lon Milo Duquette said when he was on my podcast and asked this.
So secrecy is secrecy. Generally, I'm opposed to, because I like to think if somebody wants to ask me a question, I should be able to answer it. Because I've seen secrecy. I mean, secrecy did cause problems in the last days of Farrell because they did take their oaths too seriously and were unable to train people afterwards. So a lot of material went missing. You know, a lot of things that happened in Farrell we don't know about because it was they were obeying their oaths and were keeping it secret, which is fine, I suppose, but just a bit sad. So, but the other side of it is that people can take teaching, such as certain people who shouldn't be named, and reprocess it in their own image and serve it up again and say it's new. And then they say, look, I've invented this. But so they parcel it out on courses and everything, piecemeal, and say, I'm only giving you this partly secret. I mean, even Reiki does the same thing. You're only given passwords at certain grades. And I mean, that just says it's rubbish to me, because it means that you've password protected something that doesn't need to be password protected. So yeah, secrecy I'm on the fence. I think there are cases where it is valid and useful, and I think there are cases where it isn't. I think it is valid when if you look at the Oath of the Golden Dawn, where you say, I will keep the names of the members present secret, that's fine. Provided, because, you know, people would be embarrassed if you put it out on a blog that I was in my Golden Dawn temple with this person. It's not fair to them. So I think that's fair enough. But that's standard. I think it's one of the things funny is that because we do translation work and we do a lot of GPT, which is the European secrecy laws, you know, personal data, that sort of stuff. And a lot of that is straight, you could say, is straight from the Golden Dawn, because it's saying you will not give out this information. You will not allow it to be passed on to somebody else. You will. It was all the same stuff, and that's fair enough, I think.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. I'm sure people will find that valuable, because it's something that keeps coming up, and it's always good just the more we get I think healthy, mature views out there, the more we can push back against the people who would like to use these old traditions for power and control, which is often how they get abused, right? That's what it's. And I love that you said the same thing Lon said. Like, if they're ready to ask the question, then they're ready for the information, generally speaking. And especially I think if you pair that with an idea I heard from one of my mentors, friends, teachers, who was like an 80-something-year-old from the old days of the Church of All Worlds in California. And she said one thing all the time to me that I just loved. She said, it doesn't matter about secrets, because the mystery is not in information. The mystery is the experience. And
exactly.
I've said that ever since. The mystery that you're looking for is the experience. So so many people, I'm sure you have this, even have experienced this even more than I, how many people come to us asking for information, expecting that something we say is going to cause some revelatory effect or divine transmission or transformation. It's like, no. You know, you can't just be told what meditating for 20 years will do for you. You have to go do it. That's
Yep.
the mystery. It's what you experience from doing it yourself. And I love that you have this practical view of you remind us constantly in your work of the importance of practical work, practical experience, and personal understanding and transformation being brought back to life in the work of the magician. So as we experience and practice magic, we put out work that shows an evolution, that isn't just a recapitulation or running over and over again the same old experiences, like everyone trying to recreate Taftartaret ritual and see if they can have the same experience as someone else, or someone trying to
No
do
one can
Enochian
pronounce it.
to have. Yeah, I don't exactly. That's why we
It's like,
vibrate it, because you don't have to enunciate as clearly.
oh, is that what you do? I just avoid it. I just say, okay, I'm gonna do Mercury instead.
Yeah. Okay. So another hot question: what's he think about how the modern GD approaches alchemy? We want the smoke, Nick. We want the hot takes. Well, yes,
Okay,
that's what
my
he's
view
here
on
for.
alchemy generally, which is incredibly unpopular, is that
Give it to me.
alchemy is designed to make something simple obscure, and therefore a complete waste of time.
Hmm.
If you think about anything you do alchemically, it's a big, rich terminology. It doesn't actually help you much, and no one can agree on anything. So there are different steps of alchemy. I mean, I've done plant alchemy, I've tried it. Um, I've tried most of the stuff I rubbish, so it's not as that bad, but it is a way of obscuring stuff. And obscuring stuff, I mean, that's what I think it was originally in the first place anyway, is that particularly certain types of alchemy, um, they had a magical or spiritual technique, and they obscured it as a form of chemistry, and with with symbols and everything else. And that's what Jung twigged to. But the problem is that none of these symbols agree with each other, and so the Golden Dawn, you can read the Z documents in form of alchemy, form of plant alchemy. It's very similar to standard plant alchemy than the Z documents, but I don't think it helps you much. I really don't. I think it's a dead end. Not that
Yeah.
anybody wants to hear.
I know. You know. If you put me in an awkward position, because I want to agree with you, but I know a lot of my listeners will be upset if I do. So how about I sit on the fence? How about I sit on the fence? I very much
You
agree with
say
what
it's
you're
got some
saying.
use. It's
At
got
the
some
same
uses.
time, I have enjoyed the physical alchemy I've done. I do like working with plants and tinctures and all, and making bombs of beeswax. I really enjoy all of that, and I enjoy the magical side of that. We did have let me say we did have a wonderful lecture. Instead of answering this, I'll pimp my conference. We did have a great lecture on the Tyrian art, on the alchemy of Zosimos of Panopolis, and its estuaries through Dee and Kelly and the Masons, Cagliostro and Melusina, who started incorporating alchemical compounds into their masonry, such as DMT. That's what they did. And so there's some interesting stuff there from PD Newman in this past EnochiaCon and the year before that people can check out if they want to register for that course of study at enochiacon.com. There you go. There's the plug for my conference.
Okay,
So
maybe
there's some
then they haven't
interesting
noticed
stuff.
anymore. Then we
Yeah.
can move on, and nobody will notice.
Yeah, exactly. There we go. We did some half answers. So yeah, I do think some people get really into alchemy, and this is for the people who I know who are into alchemy who are listening, because they do listen to this. And yeah, I appreciate people who are into alchemy. I don't have the same fascination by studying all the terms and various numerous forms of practice that they do. But I think, you know, if that's your approach and that's some part of your spirituality, that's great. I do tend to agree slightly more with your take on things, though, which is why I don't practice these much of this stuff myself. You know, the language is an interesting form of early psychology when you apply it that way, and it's definitely a part of the Golden Dawn system and baked into it in a sense, right? But yeah, I do think it gets it's too often used to obscure meaning. I would agree. And I think a lot has already been said on this, so I think people can pick and choose what versions of alchemy, interpretations of it that they want. Like, we all know what happened with spiritual alchemy from Jung onward into the New Age. Like, that's been well discussed and studied, so we don't need to really address that. It is what it is. It's a language of the birds, and that maybe is the best term for it. Yeah. I mean, yeah, spiritual transformation, I think, is what people are usually talking about. It's what they're talking about is when we talk about it. And you don't need to obscure discussion of things like that. We've been talking about spiritual transformation throughout all of religious history and human history, right? We've been talking about it in one form or another. Even the Pythagoreans and the Hesychasts, the Platonists, the Egyptians, everyone talked about spiritual transformation, and it doesn't always need to be masked in these fancy terms. But there's arguments that they were covering up some actual things, like again, the argument that they were covering up the making of various drugs is proven now, and that makes sense. Like, if you had the secret to making dimethyltryptamine, it would make sense that you would obscure it. If Edward Kelly did know how to make it, and I'm not convinced he did, but if he did, it would make sense that he wrote that poem he wrote, where he's like, all you other alchemists who labor at Geber's fires, come to me and learn what the real deal is. You know, that would make sense if he did know how to make and extract DMT from acacia root. That would make sense.
He throw himself from a castle wall, so that would be a bit...
Yes,
he probably thought he was a bird. I can fly.
I mean, yeah, that was probably a bit rash. Fortunately,
gravity still applied.
Oh dear Lord, what a story! I mean, we had a fun time talking about all this at the conference. We really did. I mean, that's the one thing about D and Kelly and that whole period of magic and history is we're never going to run out of fun things to discuss when it comes to that. I mean, even the Shakespeare of it all is a fascinating component that's quite fun. So yeah,
I'm going to have to go soon because it's really
late. We're out of questions. This has been an epic. We did 3 hours, Nick. Oh my gosh, I thought we would run out of steam, but because it's so late for you and it's early for me, and I didn't have an early night. So thank you for being here, and thank you for gracing my podcast with your presence. And I say that without any cheek. Just thank you so much. Thank you for the great books and me and my students have worked with your Shem Grimoire so much. We also work with the non-Golden Dawn method, but sometimes we've also tried to work with a little bit of fusion. Like, you know, if we're working with a spirit in the non-GD method, well, your insights on the GD version of the spirit, and I say that in massive quotes, like, you know, because I don't see them as different spirits, just different approaches, has been amazing. In fact, I had a recent experience with one of the spirits in which I can't remember which spirit was, which is not good, but I did a one-time working with one of the Shem angels, and your description was about it brings spiritual maladies into the physical so that they can be dealt with physically. And the next day I had to rush to emergency room. And I was in and out of emergency for 3 days, getting all the tests that a 44-year-old man should get, but that I was unable to get for almost a decade due to Canada's broken medical system, right? It's fallen apart. All our doctors fled to the States, and the ones that are left, a lot of them can't practice because they didn't get the vax. And at the same time, we just got a notice sent to all our nurses saying to reject white Western medicine. This actually just happened in Canada from the government, telling nurses to reject Western white medicine. I shit you not. You can Google it. It's wild. So I did get all these tests, and know what they confirmed? That I'm great, that I'm beyond better health than they could have expected. So it's like I had these concerns. I did this spiritual work with the Shem Angel. It brought the maladies that I was worried about. I was worried about maladies and problems physically that I couldn't get tested. So I was like, am I well? Am I sick? I don't know. I feel great, feel better than ever. But they brought those things into reality. I had massive pain the next day in my chest and heart, went in, found out I'm fine, found out I'm great. So if it wasn't for working with that angel and having this sudden trauma in my body, I wouldn't have been able to go to the doctor, getting all these advanced cardiology tests and all, like, you know, the full deal. Would have bankrupted me in the States, of course. And found out I'm good. They're like, yeah, this is your chance also to just get even healthier and have a long, happy life. And I was like, that's amazing. This angel just gave me a great gift, because I couldn't have gotten those tests and found out how I'm doing without the problem that it manifested. And it was a problem that wasn't a problem. It was a problem to help me discover that I was fine. And that was amazing. So thanks be to God for that experience. And it was a fun example of me working with a traditional Shem angel, but then having an experience that lined up with your views. And so often your personal experiences with these angels has been incredibly helpful. So thank you for that. Thank you to the beautiful art your wife does, Paula. Please pass on my regards to her, and for the beautiful images she's created for us over the years. Always grateful for magical artists who share their work like that. So thank you to her. And thank you for being here today. It's been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, I'm sure there's many more things we could talk about, but we'll do it again, hopefully sometime. So yeah, thanks everyone for listening. Last chance, folks, if you want to throw a little donation or super chat to help cover this live streaming software, and then we'll play the outro video. If there's one time, what's the relevance of the Chaldean oracles to modern magicians, specifically the GD? Do you want to save that question for next time?
I just did a big long lecture on that. In fact, I think there might be something on my blog on it. So
okay,
yeah,
check his blog.
It is important.
Yeah, you want to shout out your blog and your websites just quickly?
It's nickfarrell.it.
Awesome.
That's my blog.
And the website, the books.
Yeah. Oh no, there's parts of the Golden Dawn that are entirely Chaldean oracles. So
yeah. What's your website for the book publishing? Lord Manticore Press?
Yeah, that's better found on Lulu, actually, because that site needs to be updated, and I haven't updated it. I can't update it because the guy who designed it has disappeared. So if you just do a search for the titles on lulu.com, the bookshop, they're there. They will be on Amazon soon.
I'll link them down below as well. So again, I can thank you. Have a wonderful, beautiful evening, and my best to your wife and to your entire order. Keep doing the good work. Keep doing the great work. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. Ciao, ciao.